Driving breath, sort of just combining mind, body, spirit. We'll bring it all into alignment and into our connection. Yes. Gently come back. Hello, Kristen.
Hi, Claudia.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
So I do want to say that it is January 1st, 2021, and that we were really intentional about doing this together on this day. And so what I'd like to do, Kristen, is I'm going to just introduce what we're doing. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to introduce you, and then we can just start chatting about what we said that we would chat about. Okay, so for folks watching us, I'm Claudia Cutarucci. I am a licensed psychotherapist here in Washington, D.C. And I like to say that I'm a partner therapist. And the reason why that's really, really, really important to me is because I believe that most of us haven't had the experience of partnering with people to do things, to share things as children. And so one of the things that I do in my work is to really partner people in their woundedness, in their fears, and in their gifts. I'm also the founder and creator of Dynamic Meditation, and I do workshops and run groups, and it's a process that I do that aligns mind, body, spirit. Kristen has certainly been to some of my workshops because I work as a holistic psychotherapist as well. So I have a few notes here. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm calling these, Kristen, and you're the first one, I'm calling these dynamic conversations. And it's aligned to all of my dynamic meditation work. And you are the first person to do this with me. And my calling and the reason why I want to do this for this new year is because I really believe, and you and I've talked about this a little bit, Kristen, that the original, or the OG trauma, right, is this incredible, intense experience of aloneness. Mm-hmm. And that starts when we're children, and it starts if we're in abusive households, etc. Sometimes even when we're not. This really deep rooted sensation that we are alone. And so I have it really as a calling this year through dynamic meditation to bring people together, to do a lot of partnering and togetherness. And I want people to know other really, really, really gifted people like you. And I think part of our community and our togetherness is about the exchange of gifts, Kristen. The exchange of gifts. Yeah.
I love it.
So, Kristen, the reason why we're talking is because I know you have expertise as a life coach. You have expertise in emotional intelligence, and I know you do that in all areas of your life. Yep. I know you have expertise in relationships, and I know you have expertise in the process of death, of dying, of having relationships with the people who've already died in multiple ways. But I'm going to let you talk about that. And we're just going to free float this. Okay?
Love it.
Please, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you want us to know about you.
Sure. So I think the most important thing to know about me is that I am somebody who is a connector. And so I connect people to each other. I connect people to themselves. And I really connect people to, really thinking about this as like when we're born into this world, There's nothing, like we are who we are. We're born into this world. And I think that we spend the next 20, sometimes 30, sometimes 40 years being told who we are and being told what we should do and who we should be. And so I really help people kind of release all of those blocks and experiences to really connect with who they were meant to be, and how to love. And so a lot of my work is really around emotions, because emotions are in everything. And so if we go back to the very first thing that you said, Claudia, it is that a lot of times we feel alone in any experience. And so it's really connecting people, through community workshops and allowing people to understand that no matter what experience we go through, we are not alone. There's so many people who collectively that we can learn from. And so that's what I do. I connect people to themselves and to others.
Mm-hmm. And like when you talk about, so Kristen, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you do to bring people together. Like, and it sounds like that one of the things you do is sort of like first have them identify who they are. Is that accurate? And how that relates to others, right?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, all of my work is connected through self-awareness and awareness of others. And so a huge part of what I do is emotional intelligence. And for people that have heard that word, but they're not quite sure.
Yeah, can you describe that a little bit too? Can you fill
Yeah.
out on that one for sure?
Yeah, absolutely. So emotional intelligence is really thinking about the emotions and, the things that are said, that are not said, that you bring into the room, right? So everything that you bring into the room that impacts other people. And so that can be anything from your impulse control, your, communication skills. It can be your emotional expression, meaning, do you keep things inside or do you let them out? It can be 12 different components. And so what we do is like really focus on helping people connect their experiences to who they are today. So what are the experiences that really created the person that you are, so that you are really starting with more awareness of who you are, why you operate this way, and then just understanding that emotions are involved in absolutely everything that we do and everything that we don't do. So, that feeling when you walk into a room and you can kind of be like, ooh, what's going on? That's dealing with emotions as well, right? So it's the said, it's the unsaid, it's the body language, it's our relationships. And it's really a way that instead of just operating through the world where things just happen to you and you are like, it's really saying this happened. This is why I am the way that I am because of these experiences. And it's helping people to really own the issues and challenges that they've come through, as well as to celebrate, which is so hard for people to celebrate who they are and what they've accomplished, but it's taking those two things and collectively saying, don't detach it. Don't say, oh, that wasn't me, but it's really like everything I've been through, everything that I've done, all my accomplishments, that makes up me today.
It sounds like what you're describing. And by the way, Kristen, I really appreciate you talking about emotions, because I think we've gone through like a period of really discovering the mind, neuroscience, mindfulness, how we think, how the way that our thoughts impact our emotions. I think, Kristen, that we're going into an era where it's going to be about emotions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And learning how to feel. So this is real. What you're doing is really important. So Kristen, it sounds like you help folks identify the way that because of past experience, how they participate in their own life versus just life happening to them. Does that?
Yeah, and it's not even just that, but it's also our impact on others, right? So we can I can't believe they did that, but it's also owning our part in our relationships with other people. And understanding that we have, like, there are certain things that we are really great at. But, you know, emotional intelligence is also about understanding that we can overuse those things, right? So the best example I can use is...
Yeah, give us some examples here. Yeah.
Yes. So communication, I went to a restaurant with a colleague of mine, and we went there all the time. And so we had a new server, and she came over, she was amazing. And we kind of turned to each other and we were like, oh, she's so good. And then she left and came back in 5 minutes, and we're like, oh, she's so attentive to our needs. She left again, and she kept coming back every 3 minutes, interrupting conversations. We couldn't even have a conversation without her coming over. So that's an example of overuse, where something can start out as something as an amazing, amazing skill, but because you are overusing it, it now begins to impact others. And we can do that with empathy. That's a component of emotional intelligence, where you can be so empathic that you are really just starting to impact others because you don't even become important anymore. You're now with everybody. And so everything, every person, you feel it, it's a part of you, and it really starts to impact other areas in your life. So that's an example of...
Because you don't have a sense of self, right?
Correct.
Right, you don't have a sense of self.
Correct, yeah. And then we can do the same thing where there are, you know, there's certain components that can be so dialed down that it's difficult for us to, you know, they're just dialed down, and they're dialed down for a reason and for an experience. And so...
like what? Give us an example.
Sure. So we can talk about emotional expression, which is really, you know, emotional awareness is really like, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? The ability to label emotions. And then emotional expression is, can I tell people how I am feeling? And so let's say, for example, that you a household that did not talk about emotions at all. That's just not what you did. Then your emotional expression may be a little bit, you know, it may be low on the scale. And then let's say, you know, if we add in abuse, if we add in people that are isolated, who grew up with maybe their parents working all of the time, not necessarily having friends or siblings, then your emotional expression might be lower. So it's not about where you are on the scale. It is about why you are there. Like really talking about those experiences that created who you are. So I always, like, high achievers always like to say, okay, well, what are other people? Where are they? And it's two people that have the exact same numbers on a scale, but they're there for completely different reasons. And so it's really thinking about connecting who you are to everything that has created where you are on this scale, so that you are not competing against others. You're really understanding more about yourself, and then thinking about, you know, 1 or 2 areas that you may want to improve.
So Kristen, just because not all of us know about, you know, the specifics or the rubrics you're talking about. So I'm going to try and I'll see if I can. So there's actual assessments, right? Like for IQ, for EQ, for emotional intelligence. And it sounds like that includes like a series of parameters. Is that correct? Or characteristics, and that along those characteristics, we fall at certain numbers on the scale. Is that accurate? Can you talk a little bit more about maybe the assessment itself so that we get an idea of that?
Absolutely. So there are a few different tools out there that that people can use, or assessments. And the one that I use, it takes people about 20 minutes to complete it. So it's information they are inputting. And then what it does is it compares you, like it places you on a scale, you know, basically so that you can see where each component lies. And emotional intelligence, really, like, there are a few people who helped to create some of the tools that we use today. And it's really one particular person who said, what makes people so successful where you have other people who are, have, all of these, they're intelligent, they have all of these great qualities, but yet they may not be as successful in the workplace or in life. So what is it that kind of, what is it? What's behind that? Mm-hmm. So really taking the areas that they found or the components, I like to say, that really make up these scales for emotional intelligence, and saying, these are the things that would make people extremely successful. And then that's when you get your assessment, which is normally like 20 to 25 pages. And I never just give it to people because it can be overwhelming. So we kind of walk through it together. And what it does is, like, most people, their reaction is like, okay, who got inside of my brain? Because this is like a T. And it's really like then taking that and providing strategies. You get strategies actually there that, for each component you have 5 strategies that you can work on. But it's also really like allowing people to take their own development into consideration. Where do they want to grow? And not focusing on all these different components, but thinking about 1 or 2, and that's it. So that's really how the assessment works. And it really talks about, because we can talk about how you are in relationships. We can talk about how you are at work, because sometimes who you are
using the information that was garnished from the assessment. What are some of the components? Just because I really think this is just so juicy. Go ahead. What are some of the components?
So you have social responsibility, which is an interesting one, because that is, for some people that work in nonprofits, and, it's really like thinking about, our society, and thinking about, like, do you help out? Are you really concerned about other people? So that's social responsibility. We have empathy. We have, interpersonal communication. We have emotional expression. We have self-confidence, right? So that's really taking exactly what we kind of talked about earlier, where understanding that the challenges and obstacles that you have, like you embrace that. But in addition to that, it's also, you understand your strengths as well. So tying those together. Mm-hmm. We have one that is really about your level of, achieving, so it's really about, are you the person who likes to take courses and likes to really improve themselves? So there's a measurement for that as well. So there are a bunch of different ones that really relate to everything that we are.
So that sort of sketches you specifically, right? Correct. And you get to say, I'm this number on emotional expressiveness, and I'm this number on confidence, right? Like, correct. And then you work with the person. Kristen, this is such a, what is one of your favorites and why? Like and maybe you could share, I don't know if that's directly related to you, but what's one of your favorites?
So
that you like maybe surprised you, or that you're like, oh, I use this all the time. Just say something about that.
So I will tell you one that I find that is when we talk about our levels of, of achieving, right? And I do want people to know that I am not looking at the numbers, right? I am looking at, right? So I don't care why. I'm looking at the why.
Yes.
But it is common for people who are really high achievers. There's always a reason behind that. And so there are times where I see that somebody is so like achieving. They really are interested in growth, but yet their confidence is much lower. And the reason for that, there's always a connection between different subscales. And that connection is that most of the time people, we are attempting to achieve because there's something from our childhood where we did not feel that seen and valued. So
like a compensation, Kristen?
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of feel like, all right, if I get this degree, if I write this book, if I do this, that, you know, subconsciously, and most people are not even aware of this, but subconsciously, I'm going to be seen and heard.
Yes.
It's really almost like you are trying to outrun your confidence. You're really trying to boost it. And so there are certain things that with working with so many different people that I can see and that I can really help people understand that. And this is all like, you know, having done this in corporations, this is something, emotional intelligence is something that is not shared with anybody else except for me and that person. I share it with managers. I never share it with anybody else because it is really about your own personal development. Has nothing to do with how great you are at work or how much that you may want to improve at work or in your personal life. It is really about you and where you want to grow. And it's about your self-awareness. How can you take this information and then go, whew, okay, so many things I didn't see about who I was and about these experiences that created the person that I am.
Well, and it can cause exponential growth in multiple areas, right? Not just at work, but at home as a parent, like just that focus. Kristen, there's lots of ways that I define meditation, but one of the ways I define it is being able to name things. Sometimes naming something gives you this like incredible, beautiful waterfall of relief and of congruence and alignment. And it sounds like that's what you do when you can identify the components of emotional intelligence. Does that sound accurate, right?
Completely. And that's one of the components is like, are you able to label your emotions? And there's power in that because you have some people who may just feel numb, right? So if you think about some of the people that may come to you for a therapist, you might have some people that are just numb or that are just, you know, angry or that are extremely sad. There's always a reason behind all of these things. There's a reason behind everything that we do. When I used to work as an administrator in school, people might say, like, I heard a couple people say, oh, this student is lazy. No, I don't believe anybody is just lazy just to be lazy. There is a reason for everything that we do, you know? It could be somebody had a learning disability or they were placed in the wrong class or they felt that, they weren't able to, as a child, be able to say, like, everybody's learning faster than me. What do I do? Like, I feel left behind, right? So they just don't. They just, right? So that's the most important thing for me is that there is a reason behind everything that we do, but sometimes we just operate. I mean, you think about it as a kid, right? So I remember my aunt saying to me with my cousin, babysitting my younger cousin, and they were like, listen, if he starts to rub his eyes, that means he's tired. Well, we have things that we do that we don't know that we.
Oh, yes.
And or this one that I really did not like at school, where when they would say, oh, if a boy pushes you, he likes you, right?
Yeah, that sets up a lifelong
relationship with a lot of things, right? Yes. Ultimately, it's the inability for kids to really say, I like you, or I'm hurt, I'm sad, I feel rejected, I feel alone. There are all these feelings that we experience, and we are not taught how to do them.
Yes.
And what happens, like what I see is, I see a lot of high achievers at work who have had tremendously sad experiences as a kid that they're trying to outrun.
Yes.
And so I'm a person who's able to go into a room and figure things out really quickly. And that's something that I absolutely do with my clients, is that I'm able to connect all the dots and say, here we go. Now, here are the action steps that we can do to to grow whatever area that you want to work on. Because it's not about what I want, it's about what you want. And that's the beauty of self-awareness. It's like, whew, did not know these things were happening, right? It's like you know what that's like, Claudia? I like to call it the pen, right? So it's like, you know how you sit in a room and you hear someone like, you know, clicking the pen, and everybody's like, oh, I hear this, what's happening? And you're like, how do you not know what you're doing? And
yes, great example.
yeah, and sometimes they see it and then they're like, oh, okay, let me put that down. And then other times they never know. Mm-hmm. That's really what self-awareness is. It's like you sometimes, and all of us have been that person, we have been the pin clicker.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure.
I mean, why is everybody talking? What's happening? So that's what our experiences do for us, is that
sure.
They enable us to operate in a way that we are not aware. But sometimes everybody else is. Sometimes they don't want to tell us. They don't know how to tell us, or we're not open for us. You know, we're not open for any type of information because we're simply not ready at that moment.
Yes, yes.
Timing is so important.
Yes, yes. Kristen, so this exploration of the why, you say that's part of what really, you know, inspires you or motivates you, or what you want to share with your clients. What makes that different from a psychotherapist? Or is it similar when you go back and explore the why of why they're not emotionally expressive, for example?
You know, it's super interesting because what I've found in having worked with, you know, general managers and regional vice presidents and, you know, anybody, right, is that in that hour and a half that we are talking, I am asking questions that nobody else has ever asked them before. Mm. And that, I think, is the difference, where we have a lot of information that people are really looking at the experiences, they're looking at the why. Whereas I feel like in therapy, sometimes it can take you, you know, a lot of sessions to get to something that you did not know existed, you know, that you need to unlock.
Like the unconscious part, some of the
Correct.
work with the unconscious. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And I think because these are discussions that are so targeted that it really just kind of, it brings it up. These are not, you know, we're not running around talking about our lives, you know, with other people all the time, you know? And so it allows us to have a safe space to really understand so many different areas of your life that and those experiences, and it allows you to connect it. And then I always say, like, there are definitely times where I have suggested therapy for other clients where there might be something that is deeper, a lot of experiences, you know, in working with people where they have been molested in some way. And that is the work that you need to do with a therapist. Even if they are comfortable sharing that with me, I then will say, you know, work with a therapist to really.
Why is that?
Why
don't you do the work?
So when you're a coach, there's a difference. There's a slight difference. So as a therapist and as a coach, there are things that bump up against each other, right? But at the end of the day, my job is not to dive deep into your issues. My job is to really, you know, allow you to have that self-awareness.
Yes.
You can make that choice of if you want to dive deeper into any of those connections. And so I think that's the difference between coaching and therapy, is that they can go like this, but it's really important for a coach, for me, to not jump over into this role, and to really, you know, allow people to make that choice to do that with a therapist, you know?
It sounds like it can be mutually, like it can work together though too. Everything you've described, that's one of the things that I love about this is this idea of mining for reasons of how we interact, for reasons of why we feel the way we do, but also for like in your case of how to like decide how to move forward, right? I think one of the things for coaches is like, where do we go from here? We've got this information now, and where do we go from here, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think the slight nuance here is like, I can work with you so that you understand the why. I can help, it's like, so for example, if somebody, had a single parent, nobody else was in, that worked all the time and they were in the house by themselves, that might be an indicator of why emotional expression is low. So I give you the why. If you want to dig deeper and talk about those feelings and what that was like and what you experienced and how that connected to other people, then that is where you would go to really talk about those things.
Right.
But what I do is I connect it all for you, right? I help you connect it for yourself. And that's really the better way to say that. Empowering you to connect it for yourself.
Yes.
So that you can say, whew, this is me. This is the why. And then if it's about communication and how you communicate more, that's where I come in as a coach. With strategies on how to communicate in different ways, or understanding how we communicate and having different communication styles. That's where I come in. But for a therapist, it would be, what does that feel like to have?
Or tell the story.
Correct.
Or go and reformat the story sometimes. But
correct.
Kristen, and so how is the format? Like, so let's say someone calls you and says, listen, I know this is your area of expertise. Then what do you do? What's the format that you do with clients around this?
So the first thing is really talking to clients. Like we set up, people can always go to my website and want to contact me and type in that they want to pursue personal coaching or executive coaching. And then the next thing would be, I talk to each person, because you might have two people that want the same thing. Like, let's say they want to navigate the workplace better, or they want to improve their intimate personal relationships. But it might be a completely different conversation for each person. Really understanding exactly what people want out of it, and understanding if, exactly what it is that they want. And so we get clear on that. And then if they're...
Do you always do emotional intelligence?
I do, as a part of personal coaching and a part of executive coaching. That very first session is always an hour and a half of us talking. So that people get to know exactly who they are in that hour and a half, and then we can move forward in any area that comes up or any area that they want to work on.
I see.
That emotional intelligence
is foundational.
It completely is. And
it's foundational.
And so having run a mentor program for a company, it is, with executives, it is really the game changer. It's the one assessment that I absolutely love, because it's a game changer for anyone who takes it. It tells you about who you are in your life, who you are at work, who you are in your intimate relationships. It really gives you that knowledge where you can say, like, okay, got it, and this is where I would like to go.
Can you give an example when you say game changer? Like, can you think of someone of course, without disclosing, like where you were like, after their emotional intelligence assessment and your work with them, what happened?
Sure. And I will actually tell you somebody who's I won't name names, but someone who's very open with talking about their experience. There were things that I'm able to pick up from people. For her, I will tell you the end result. She ended up losing 50 pounds and also being promoted. But that 50 pounds was really the emotional baggage that she had been carrying her whole life, that was really unlocked in our session, that allowed her to then move forward in her life. There are definitely people, you know, I can think of another example of, you know, sometimes when you are, you know, you're operating in the workforce, we just get to a point where we just do. And it's just like, oh, I get up, I do this, I do that. We're not really thinking about how we're moving through our workforce. But I was working with one particular woman in person, one particular woman who realized that what she was doing is trying to, she was not empowering her staff. And I will tell you why, because she was creating these relationships with them where she was giving them so much information, and she was like, oh, okay, and I think you should do this and this, right? So it's not setting people up to have a voice or to empower them to solve problems on their own. Because sometimes problem solving or decision making is a part of emotional intelligence. We are so good at solving problems that we do it for other people, not understanding that a part of our growth is being able to solve problems on our own. So when you realize the why, and the why is subconsciously, you really want affirmation. That's what you really want. You helped me with this problem. She helped me with this problem. He helped me with this problem. And so it's really that subconscious affirmation. And so when you can understand where it comes from and how it's connected, you can then take a step back and say, okay, I get it. And now what steps do I take to make sure that I am empowering the people around me to really be successful on their own?
Well, it sounds like what you're saying, again, in that example was that is a component, let's say problem solving, that goes amok, right? Because if you're a mom, if you're a boss, if you're a manager, that will be incredibly depleting, because not only are you always solving everyone's problems and set yourself up in that role, but you're not allowing others to grow. It stunts, it enables, right, others to not solve problems. So that's what you're describing, is like this very useful characteristic that sort of can go amok, and it can go amok for reasons like needing affirmation, correct? Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the principle of overuse, right? Solving a problem. Yeah. If you really think about it, like let's talk. Like if you are a person, let's say, for example, that grows up and you are a parentified child, meaning that you have responsibilities that most children don't have, but you do. You know, whether that's taking care of your siblings, getting them ready for school, whatever that is, you're solving problems. And so it creates a situation where you are now always solving problems in life, because that's the experience that you had.
Yes.
And for you, you know, we normally replicate our feelings in childhood. And our feelings are, we were helpful, right? We're putting our energy and emotions into.
We were valued for being helpful, correct? For example, that came at high value and at high cost, right? At high value and high cost.
Yes.
And of course, you know, my little therapist-y mind, it's also a way of not allowing others to come in, right? The whole partnering thing, right? Right, Kristen? That goes into
relationships, right?
Yes. So why don't we do that? So everyone can see how juicy this subject is. And that's why I really wanted you to talk more fully about this, your expertise on this. But let's, because all of this, right, the knowledge of self leads us into how we relate to others, how we don't relate to others. So let's move into love languaging, right? Yay, we love this. So, which is your other area And by the way, everyone, I've asked Kristen to offer a few workshops. And as a lot of people know that I love to mentor young people in many, many, many ways. It's one of my deep, deep callings is to mentor young people. And I've asked Kristen to offer some not only emotional intelligence expertise, but also love language workshops for younger people. And let's talk about that, because love language, compatibility, this is just delicious stuff.
Yeah, and the reason why I love, Claudia, that you're offering it for younger people is that what we don't understand is that when we have relationships, we are not just impacting ourselves. We are impacting kids if we choose to or can have them. We are impacting families. We are impacting generations to come. In problem skills, ability to communicate, to create, like to make people feel loved and valued. Like this is not just about us. This is impacting generations of people. And that is why, and I always say this, and I share this with people, like I grew up with, two brothers, and I was at the kitchen table at 5 years old. My parents were arguing because my parents were not the most compatible at all. And they were arguing, and all of us were sitting around, and one of my brothers was like, hey, why don't they just get a divorce? And we were like, yeah, why don't they just get a divorce? Now, at 5 years old, you don't know what love is, but you know the feeling when two people are not getting along and how that affects you. Yes. And I don't ever want people to feel the way that I felt growing up. Yes. So that's a part of doing this work. But I will talk about my mom, which is an aha moment for love languages. So
can you just give us, what are the love languages? Just start there and then go into the example with your mom. For sure.
Perfect. So your love language is actually how you feel valued and loved in a relationship. And so
how you feel valued and how you feel loved in a relationship.
Correct. So you have 5 of them, and we can talk about them very quickly. So we have gifts, and it's not just about like these extravagant gifts. It can be little things. It's really just like that you feel seen, right? So someone goes someplace and brings you back a little souvenir, and you're like, oh my God, I was thought about, right? So that's gifts. You have quality time, and quality time is like, my husband is definitely a quality time person. So if we're sitting at the dining room table and I am doing this, he'll be like, hello? And I'm like, okay, got you. All right. Keep feel like that we are talking and that we are communicating. Time. And then we have words of affirmation, which is people sending you little notes or calling you or telling you what you mean to them, why they love something, why this was important. Right. That's words of affirmation.
Noticing and expressing.
Correct. Yep. And then we have physical touch. So those are the people that love hugs and, maybe holding hands. It's not just about sex, right? It's really like that intimate embracing and things like that, right? And then you have acts of service. So let's talk about that for a moment. So every single Christmas, I would, when I was younger, it just seemed like my mom, I would buy her things, and it was like, you could just tell as a kid, like she wasn't 100% happy with whatever, right? Because as a kid, and one time for Mother's Day, I was like, oh, my dad just redid the bathroom, so she probably wants a light. Let's get her a light for Mother's Day. Yeah, that did not work. But
and that would have fallen under gifts, correct? Love language, sort of.
Fallen under a bad gift, Claudia. No mom wants a bathroom light. So ultimately, as I was an adult, like I remember on Christmas Eve in a store, like, oh my God, I don't know what to get her. I don't know. And I was like really stressed about it. And then I found the 5 love languages, which you can take a quiz online. It'll take you maybe 5 minutes to understand your love languages. And the reality is we have all 5 within us. It's just you will navigate towards one or two top ones, but we have all five of us. Okay. So every year, my mom, for Mother's Day, would plant flowers in her front yard. And so one Mother's Day, like after I read the book and I heard about acts of service, that's when I was like, oh, this is my mother. My mom is acts of service, right? So for her, if you do something to lighten her load,
yes,
that's how she feels loved, right? So people with acts of service, they love like when you're vacuuming, you're making dinner so they don't have to, you're cleaning up around the house, or you're planting her Mother's Day flowers so that she does not have to. So that became my gift on Mother's Day, is to go over and plant her flowers. And that is what she
oh, yes.
So that changed my life in understanding that, number one, I'm definitely words of affirmation, right? My husband is words of affirmation. Like we're both, quality time as well. And so sometimes it is understanding in a relationship, whether it's intimate or friends or family, that you need to shift a little bit to do things the way that people feel heard and valued and loved.
Yes.
Their language. It's just like speaking Spanish or speaking French. If you don't know the language, you can't communicate.
So let me pause you in a second, because I want to make a link for a second. So you, having done work on becoming self-aware, and with all emotional intelligence stuff, right, where we begin, and also probably have high, like, empathic, right? One of your strong components is being empathic, makes you the type of person that really investigated and wanted to know what your mother's love language is, right? Because if we're not self-aware, right, you might not, you'd be like, why are they such a pain? Why does she never like my gifts, right?
Right.
But you really wanted to make the connection, because you say you're a connector, right? Which allowed you to find her love language and then provide it for her, okay? What you're also describing, and what we'll probably segue here, is then compatibility, right? Is this a way to find then let's talk about like emotional compatibility.
Oof, yes.
Yes.
That is, see, what happens is a lot of times, like I will hear people, there's certain myths in relationships. Like one of them is that being in a relationship is just completely hard work, right? And what I always tell people is being in a relationship with the wrong person is hard work. Okay? Now, it does require a little bit of work as well, but there's a difference. When you are not compatible with someone, it's the basis and foundation for everything in the relationship. And I don't think people spend enough time really trying to figure out if they are compatible with the other person. And I'll say it like this. So for example, how you solve problems is so important. So if you have a person who you get into an argument and they will not speak to you for 3 days, will not communicate with you for 3 days. If you are a person who loves to just talk about it and get over it and, talk about what happened and then figure out how you can move forward, you being with someone who is not going to talk to you for 2 to 3 days is not going to work for you. And so you either have to figure out how to shorten that time or select someone who likes to solve problems the way that you do. Okay. There are other things, like I have, couples that I know where they don't like doing anything together. That's huge. It's so huge. Like one of the things, like when I first met my husband, like we would just be driving and we would see like a place and we'd be like, oh, do you want to stop and maybe have a drink there? Oh yeah, let's stop. So it's like, you have to have things in common that you like to do, because that means you're compatible. That means, like, and we know about this pandemic where some couples are like,
right. It's probably been stirred up is that they're in a space together. Sure.
Correct, because they're not compatible.
Sure. So even if we're sexually aroused by someone, if there's high sexual chemistry, even sometimes, and let me check this out because I think there's some mythology around this. Even sometimes when we feel like really in love, like we love someone, it doesn't always mean we're going to be compatible. And I think that's where some of the clashes take place, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Because you have that, like, people may be able to relate to having that person where you're like, oh my God, like when I see them, all I want to do is have sex, right? Like,
yes.
You see that person. But the other thing is, I'll tell you, like for me, at the time I just ate cheese pizza and I was with a guy who was consistently ordering pepperoni pizza. Something that simple, when it's done repeatedly, makes you feel or makes you understand that that person doesn't necessarily care enough about you. It's not, it's a certain sense of it's self versus others, right? So can you say, hey, let's get half pepperoni, half cheese? Like those little things can be greater signs of not being compatible emotionally because someone is not considering you, your thoughts, your feelings. You know, it can be a greater thing, right?
Well, it's interesting because certainly in therapy, Kristen, like people are like, you know, we were getting into fights about little things. They say that all the time. It was ridiculous. It was the little things. And yet the little things, right, go into this massive, you don't see me, you don't hear me, is much deeper, right? Like it's these little things that really can go into pretty painful arguing and separations from our loved ones, including parents and children, right? Because this love languages can apply to parents and children.
Completely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So you might have, you know, if we talk about introversion versus extroversion, and the best way for me to explain it is that introversion, introverts are people that need to recharge on, you know, by themselves, and extroverts, they recharge with other people. Even for my kids, I have a complete extrovert, right? She always has to be around other people. But in addition to that, I have a son who is an introvert, right? He has to recharge on his own. So even if you talk about gifts, it might be a video game for him is like the best thing ever, right? Because he's there by himself, or he can connect and be with his friends. But for her, it's not about that. Her biggest punishment, when she was 3 years old, it was being placed on the couch for 5 minutes by herself in the living room, and where you think that she was just going to die. Now, for someone else, they're like, really, this is punishment? But for her, it was because she craved people.
Yeah.
She said to me later, she was like, listen, and we don't spank the kids, but she was like, I would rather be spanked because that's over. But it's like, we can laugh about it now, but it's so important that we think about love languages with kids. For her, it's definitely words of affirmation. You know, and then and actually I had all of the kids take their love languages. This is years ago. They all took them so that we can
Brilliant.
Yeah, we understand exactly how they feel loved. That's
brilliant. And are you saying any quiz? Like maybe when you post this, you could put some links as to some quizzes.
Absolutely. There's a love language quiz written by the author of the book, and there are different love languages for work and different things like that. But you can take the quiz in 5 minutes and understand your love language.
Yes. And Kristen, like I'm sorry, I just keep giving you more work. This just underscores the importance of young people knowing this about themselves. It's just freaking brilliant, right? But also, I really want to invite you, Kristen, really to do a workshop for couples where it might be a 3-day where they actually know their emotional intelligence, they know their love languaging. I really want to invite you to do this. Like if I know you're super
Claudia,
busy. You love this. It's your
Oh my
jam.
God, yes. I would love to do
I
that.
do. I really do want to invite you to do this because I do think these are gifts to everyone we relate to, basically everyone we relate to. And as you said, if we can identify very quickly, oh, that's how they like to be loved, right?
Correct.
I know that for my teen son, we've been talking about it in those terms, like him doing the chores, for example, without me asking. And I realized, oh, it's acts of service for me. I feel really unseen if he doesn't do it without me asking, because that was the key. We were trying, he's like, but I do that once you ask. And I realized that the key for me was doing it without me asking, right? And this isn't unusual for lots of people in their homes, right? That someone see and lighten your load, as you said about your mother, right? Lighten the load. So Kristen, I know, like, I'd like us to segue, as everyone can see, just the most delicious subjects that we've been talking about, but let's segue into like our last and third subject. And, you know, you and I have done a lot of talking about death.
Yeah.
And I know this might sound like a weird segue or a buzzkill for people. So I'd like to make a link here. Well, in general terms, death has a great deal of sorrow, of abandonment. There's all sorts of emotions associated with that. Number one. Number two, it is an unspoken sometimes. It can be a big unspoken. And it can be, and again, the idea of naming death, naming feelings around death. The other thing is, of course, we just went through a really hard year, right, Kristen?
Yeah.
Of seeing not only physical death due to COVID, physical deaths in the Black Lives Matter movement, but just the death of a lot of ways of existing, death in the way, in systems. We're seeing, and you and I have been talking a lot about the process of death. And one of the things that we've identified, or that you've said for many years, is you have a unique relationship to death. And one of the things that you and I agreed on in discussing today was talking about how we can make death another relationship that can be beautiful, that can provide closure, that where we can really openly de-taboo it, right?
Yeah.
Because just as we can make birth beautiful, the birth of a child, we can make death something that has ritual and beauty and naming. And then, of course, we can also talk about sort of continuing our relationship with people.
Correct.
So what can you just talk about your unique, very unique relationship to this, Kristen?
Yeah, so for me, I'll tell you how this all started was when people passed away, I found myself, just even in my own family, you know, when my uncle passed away and my aunt and her had been married for close to 50 years, it was really all she really knew. And I found myself over at her house talking to her about the stages of change. And for me, working with people and navigating the workplace, I started to realize that there's so many similarities to navigating change. You know, you get a new manager, it's a new department, versus also navigating change and, you know, death in your own life. And so I have always been comfortable talking about death in a way that other people, like, it might be taboo, but for me, just like emotions, it's a lot of times in death, we're taught you shouldn't, like, even thinking about the rituals with funerals and things like that. Don't say anything bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
We only talk about this person in a positive light. And
Mm-hmm.
that was not the experience for me. Like when my dad passed away, I had people coming to me saying, is it weird that I really enjoyed that funeral? Because my brothers and I, we talked about my dad and all components of who he was.
Yes.
We couldn't just be like, he was the most wonderful person ever. No, we did kind of talk about him. We talked about him. And so I think that that's what happens with people, is that there are certain emotions that get shut off, or we feel that we have to feel a certain way. So I will tell you that, as an example, I will tell you that I started running navigating death workshops. And now since then it's
Yes.
been lost.
Yes.
And it's when people come together, and I talk about my experience with my own father who passed away from cancer, and what that's like to watch someone dying and to know that they are passing away. And then you couple that with the experience of, Mr. Sproul, who was almost like my second dad, and him just passing away completely as a surprise, and the difference in emotions that occur when you have that. So you hear about my experience, but the best part about the sessions are after that, we start talking and people are sharing their experiences, and we're talking about grief, and we're talking about, shame, and we're talking about anger, and we're talking about emotions that have been so taboo forever. Whereas,
For example, anger, sometimes when the
Completely.
person dies, you're not only angry maybe that you feel abandoned, but maybe there was unprocessed or unclosed anger of when they were alive, correct?
Correct. I mean, the thing is that, and I had to process that with my dad as well. There were definitely things that, your brain starts to experience, like, oh, well, he was the second youngest of 8 kids and this and that, without really like then beginning to feel that you can feel angry, and that you have permission to feel angry towards people that have passed away. Like,
Yes.
death is a loss. And that's something that people don't get. Like, I, have someone who shared in the workshop and who's open about sharing this, is that the best day of her life was when her grandfather passed away because he had been molesting her.
Yes.
So at 12 years old, she answered the phone. Her grandfather had passed away. She says it was the best day of her life. There's anger, grief, shame, happiness, all of these feelings that we can experience. Relief, if you're a caretaker and you have somebody with Alzheimer's for 8 years, that relief that they are no longer there. It's not something that people tend to talk about, but there is a certain level of emotions. They're infused, and they change and they morph, and you can get to here and then come back to here. Grief is really it's a process that you move through. You don't get over the loss of somebody. You move through it and it changes. And then your relationship.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Kristen. Like some of the things that have been so powerful, I remember you mentioning sort of like how people go back to normal, but you don't. And you're expected to go back to normal after someone dies. So what you just described was that there are feelings beyond deep sorrow, which is sort of the standard feeling. And we know and we acknowledge and we want to partner in deep sorrow with people, but we also want to partner with relief, and we want to partner with guilt, and we want to partner with all what you're saying, all these other pop-up drive-through emotions that come up, and give them some space. But also there's other subtle and nuanced things, like this idea that everyone expects you to just go back to normal, and you have really good examples of that, and yet it's not for that person. It's not normal. That takes a while, right?
Yeah, I don't even think it actually, I don't believe that there is a normal anymore, because I think when you lose someone,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for me, it's life before my father passed away, and there's life after my father passed away. And those are very different. My relationship with my father is the best that it's ever been.
Now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it changes. You start understanding how you have to, like that person, I definitely believe death is just, it's a different form. So if you have ice, you have water, you have vapor, death is a different form. Death is really like that vapor, where they are still around. But for me, I had to remember that it was hearing my uncle's laugh, who laughs just like my dad. That's my dad still being. Mm-hmm. A song coming on my phone that I'm.
Oh, I lost you for a second there. The microphone. Speak.
Helicopter just.
There we go. Okay, yeah.
So let me kind of go back, because there was a helicopter. So, all right. So it is hearing my uncle laugh, and it's hearing that that's my dad's laugh, the same exact laugh. It is hearing a song that pops up on my phone. Like, that's my dad's favorite song. It's understanding that they are just here in different ways. It might be, for some people, it might be numbers like, 1212 or 1111 that come up on their phone. It's understanding that people are still here to help us, but there's a difference. It is that we now can be free to feel any emotion under the face of the earth without it impacting them at all. And that's important for people, because sometimes, like, we try and be the keeper of stories, and we have to protect their image and who they are. But once people pass away, they only unconditionally love you. And so whatever you say or feel doesn't impact them at all. It is your way. It's your moment of being freer than you've ever been when they are.
It's your work too, right? And Kristen, I think these navigating death workshops that you provide give a format, just everything else that we've talked about today, right? It is like therapy and coaching and whatever it is, gives a space, holds space, gives a format for this to be explored and processed. And imagine the gift of creating a space where people come together and they can all have their rainbow, their spectrum of feelings around death. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that you do, that's, one of the things that I do, my parents haven't died, but I really, I know that there's things about them that one of the things I like to do, especially because of meditation and really intensifying the now moment, is not in a morbid way, but really imagining when they're not here. Mm-hmm. And so it allows me to be so intensely, deeply present beyond my annoyances, beyond our history, maybe some of my traumatic history with them. I'm really able to love their handwriting now, right? The little things like that, like the laughter, their handwriting, really be present to them, because I'm able to hold their death, right? I'm able to actually hold their death. And which isn't to say I'm not going to navigate a bunch of emotions after they die, but it allows me to be in the now moment very deeply with them. And I think that goes for kids and partners and lovers and and me. Kristen, one of the things I've really loved about what you do in your navigating death workshops is some of the rituals that you invite people to do, like this this letter writing, right? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, so letter writing for me, when I started realizing that I had feelings and emotions popping up about my father, I actually just set a timer for 20 minutes and wrote whatever I felt, just wrote it for 20 minutes. Because the way you look at that is like, it is getting out, like your body only has like, think about it. It's like 100%, that's what we have of these emotions that can be in our body before we experience this overload. Right? And that overload can be depression, it can be unhappiness, it can be anger, it can be those things, right?
It can be migraines, it can be
oh,
like it lodges, we talk about this a lot, it lodges in the body in so many ways.
Completely. And I realized that with my dad. It was actually a moment when I started looking at Chinese medicine and started learning about how they really equate certain organs with certain emotions. So you have issues with certain organs depending on the emotion that you're experiencing. And that led me to understanding that even with my father with cancer, your emotions get trapped inside of you and they have to go someplace. So they go into your tissue, they go into your cells, they create illness that you may spend your life trying to get rid of, because it's really emotions that are not being navigated, they're not being released. And so, with all of that, like, so that's what the letter writing was for me. Set your timer, 20 minutes, write. And took it and I shredded it. I didn't want it to go back into my subconscious by reading it. I just wanted to release it. And so doing that a few times has allowed me to free up this space in me that is specifically for happiness and joy. That's what I want my life to be about: laughter, happiness, and joy, but also embracing sadness and things like that too. But I don't want my whole life to be around sadness. And so that's what I tell people is that
trauma and suffering, sure.
Yeah, like you can write letters to anybody. They can be alive, they can be dead, but like whatever you need to get out, it's a great way of just setting your timer for 20 minutes and then just letting it out and shred it. Or you can burn it, or you can rip it up. Like there's so much, beauty in how you are releasing these emotions. But I think that's an important thing. But I think the other thing is celebrating that person. This is a person that you want to celebrate. I will eat vanilla ice cream and think about my father. That was his favorite dessert,
Yes.
his favorite drink. It is,
it's a way of staying in relationship with him.
Completely.
Yes.
My colleague that passed away, about 3 or 4 months ago, it was a complete and utter shock and surprise. And I think that I was probably sitting on the sofa for a good 24 hours, just numb. Didn't know how to feel, didn't know, just felt like the world should not be continuing to go without her here. And so important is that we sometimes feel like the world, why isn't the world stopping for this person,
Yes.
And so I think that it is, it's also like for me, what I do is I celebrate things with her. If I think of something that she totally I would want to text her and tell her, I completely am like, hey, is this not hilarious, right? So I have a teacup where I'm like, oh, this is tea with her, so it's like you have to really start to shift and change your relationship with people once they've passed away, because things are just different.
And if it means you're sobbing at the steering wheel, it means that too.
Completely.
If it means you are completely tuning out at work because of this death, it means that too.
Oh, it means permission to feel however you feel. I didn't want to do any work for an entire week. Nothing. I couldn't even imagine myself getting up to my computer, So it is literally giving yourself permission, and that's what we don't do. And I think that's one of the issues that we kind of, you know, from childhood, it's like you have to feel a certain way, you have to do a certain thing, you've got to do this, you have to do that. And death is one of those things where you have the permission to feel however you want to feel.
Yes.
Where emotions come to you, just let them come to you. The issue becomes when you stay in them forever, right?
Where it's always about sorrow and not about celebration with this
Correct.
person who's gone.
Yeah,
right?
it's just about celebration and not feeling the sorrow, because there's some,
or the anger, right?
Oh,
or
yeah.
the other little peppered feelings that come up.
Yeah. Or resentment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For a lot of different reasons. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's everything that I do. I want to say that tie with all of my work is awareness of emotions, understanding why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, and then choosing a path forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's it. Choosing a path forward.
And I want to loop back to sort of this idea that death, you were talking about change in the workplace and how you had started to make those connections that, and I really want sort of people who are listening to this to understand that there's all sorts of deaths. There's a death as to how we're living our lives after COVID. There's all sorts of deaths. There's a death in relationships. Even in long-term marriages, we're not as feisty as we were at the beginning. There's all sorts of, I remember one woman, I was very young when she said this to me, she said, and I remember just having a moment, she said, oh, I'm grieving that my husband's losing his hair. And I thought it was so, because she said she met him with this beautiful long hair. That was her thing with him, is that he had this, but that, you know, they'd been married 20 years and he pretty much had lost most of his hair. And she said, I just have to let myself be sad about that for a little bit. And so, and that might sound minor, but there's all types of ways that we deal with death. When our kids come out of the closet, we deal with death of dreams. When there's meaning of how we thought that our life was going to be, right? And then we can celebrate a new life with those children. In any case, death is about many processes. Right, Kristen?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think there's, you know, when I kind of tie this to relationships, right? So I'm going to tie it to relationships. My mom, I told you that, you know, planted flowers.
Yes.
And so now what she will do is she'll come over, and she always helps me plant flowers in my backyard, something that we do together. And she'll yell at me in, like, you know, the next week when she comes over, and she's like, wait, you're not pinching off those dead flowers in the back. And it's something that I didn't understand at first, but when she explained it, she's like, listen, if you don't pinch off and take away the flowers that are dying, it is taking energy away from the plant and growing more flowers. So I utilize this, it's energy, right? Because we're all energy, right? And so it's utilizing this when people are even talking about relationships or intimate relationships where they're like, oh, I'm seeing this person, but I don't really like them and I don't see a future with them. Okay, yeah, cut them off, right? Because that is taking away energy towards you being in something fabulous and wonderful, right? So you use this principle. I use this principle in all areas of my life, where it is like, it's also about boundaries. Like, there's some people who are like, there's no issue with being best friends with the past 10 people that I've dated. Yeah, you're taking away energy towards a fabulous relationship that you haven't had yet, or between one that you're in right now. So that's where we come with boundaries. We come with, you know, the beauty of dying, which is, you know, there is beauty in dying.
Yes, yes.
Look at birds, like Claudia, what you were talking about before.
Yeah.
When a child is born, it is ugly. It is not like television. There are all kinds of fluids and things on the baby, and they have to clean them up, right? And then after that, it becomes the baby's laughter and all of these wonderful things associated with children. Well, death is very similar to that. Like the process when someone first passes away, when you do love them, right? It's different if you're like, okay? But when you love them and you receive that loss, it can be ugly. Like, it can be like, the moment that I actually realized my dad was gone was a month later when I went to call him. And then I, you know, collapsed in tears for 20 minutes, you know? It can be like that. It can be all of these emotions that you're not understanding, but what happens is you move into the beauty. You move into the beauty.
The beauty of it, yes.
You
The
move into
life
the
process of it, the life process of it.
Yeah.
Right, because death is a process in life.
Completely. And if we didn't have death, we would not appreciate the people that we have that are still here, you know? And it's important for me to know, like, that people are here in the physical world for a finite time. And it's up to me to make them feel valued.
In this body, at least.
Right, exactly, right? To make them feel valued, to make them feel loved.
Yes.
Them feel like they are heard and seen.
Yes.
In ways that I may not have been growing up, right? So it's like, that is my job. I look at that, whether it's my kids or my husband or my friends or my colleagues. And you have to look for the beauty in things. If you don't look, you won't find it, right?
Yes.
So you have to look at the beauty in things and just understanding that death it's a part of life. It is, you know, I think sometimes we forget that and we say like, oh, no, we're in denial. And then it happens and we're like overwhelmed, right? It's a part of life. There is beauty in creating and establishing a new relationship with people after they have passed away. There is a beauty in the relationships that grow with other people around you. That you
like the flowers, like once you take the death away from the flowers, right? There's a growth that also happens. If we do this process, right? Is what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's allowing, like, it's really allowing you to feel and experience what it is that you experience, but then also knowing when the time is right to move into beauty and happiness and understanding that just because those flowers are dying does not mean that there are not other beautiful flowers all around it. We can't do that, you know? And that's a symbol for not just people, but for the loss of, like, if someone wanted to be a doctor their whole life and they didn't pass their boards, or, you know, you thought you would always be in this relationship and you're not. You really wanted this particular job that you got terminated from. Like, there is a certain level of grief and mourning that we do have to do for things. And then it's time to really see the beauty. And that's what I am here to help people do as well.
In meditation, we talk a lot about the death of the ego and finding a new identity. And that happens, just even how we're going to come back to the world after COVID will be a death. Well, Kristen, we do have to wrap it up, but I'd like to wrap it up in this way. I knew this would be super incredibly delicious and juicy and rich and profound. I knew it. And so again, I want to reiterate why we're doing this is because I feel like you've got very specific gifts for the world. I think 2021 is going to mark the entering into an era of emotionality, of understanding ourselves as really, really learning the language of feeling and emotion. And that you can facilitate that and you can teach people how to really know that language. And that immediately, right? I think we're also coming into an era of connectedness and togetherness because we need to.
We do.
We really, really need to, which is part of my impetus to do these conversations, right? Giftedness and togetherness. And then of course, Kristen, is this conversation around death, around you and I talk about around really just using the word, saying the word, demystifying the word. We are talking about death. And there's so much that's included with that. And people need these conversations right now. They really do, after the year that we've been through, and in general. So Kristen, I'd like to end with, I'm going to read this. So as you know, I woke up one night 12 years ago with the word dynamic. I woke up like this, dynamic. I heard, and I love word magic and word meditations. So I really feel into words. And dynamic was sort of provided to me to start dynamic meditation. And I'm a psychodynamic psychotherapist, which is the study of the unconscious. So I'm going to read you some of the definitions, and this is how we're going to close. Dynamic. Number one, a process or system characterized by constant change, activity, or progress. There you go, you. Two, a person positive in attitude and full of energy and new ideas. Three, a force that stimulates change or progress within a system or process. Four, a dynamic person is one who is gelled and connects with everyone, a person who really makes a difference in the world, who does something that changes things or people. And so you are my first one, and I'm going to invite many more people to join me in dynamic conversations. And really, I think just in our day-to-day lives, we really have relationships with dynamic people. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I felt that all in my body.
I know, right? It's because it is you. You felt it, exactly. Thank you so much for doing
You're
this.
so welcome.
I really appreciate it. And everyone, we're going to do whatever it is that we do. We're going to edit this video, and we're going to put lots of links to where you can find Kristen, what workshops are coming on death, emotional intelligence. I'm really going to propose that she do a couples workshop that discusses all of this stuff, because of course there's all sorts of deaths in relationships too. Kristen, so we'll put links to where you can find her and what she does and the magic that she brings to the world. So, okay.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you. All right.